Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And welcome to this second talk on mental karma. The karma, or the karmas of mind. What our mind does, how what we do with our mind affects us in the shorter and the longer term. I hope you found the time to reflect as I asked in the previous teaching. If you did, and you found some fascinating differences between body and speech and mind, then let's follow that up. In the last talk, said that the karma we make with our body and speech involves other people, involves the world around us. And because of that, it has an interrupted nature. It's very well summed up in French by the word ponctuel. In other words, we make a physical action with another person, or speech action, we say something to them. That sows the seed of the karma. And then we leave that place, we leave that person. And it may be one lifetime, or several lifetimes, or even many lifetimes before the result of that action actually manifests. As we've seen, the actual term in the text is karma, cause and effect. Karma as one thing which has a cause time and a result time, but not cause is one thing, results another thing. We are looking at karma as once that cause is there, the result is inevitable, unless something is done about it. So that's the way that body and speech karmas work. You do it, they make what's called an imprint, a vasana, in our stream of consciousness, and that's like putting a seed under the ground that sometime in the future will produce its result. Mental karma is different. It is a continuity. It is not about meeting these circumstances, this person, that person, doing something, and then a karma is parked for the future. Mind is constantly there within us, changing all the time, but it is this stream of consciousness. It's all we are, it's all we have. And so when we look into mental karma, it is rather different. And that gives us some very interesting possibilities. And we'll come back to that in sometime in the next couple of videos. This ongoing stream of mind, this mental karma, is being shaped and reshaped all the time. And it makes me want to talk a lot about a topic that in the natural order of things will come later when we look at the way of the Bodhisattva. And it is just how well, how beautifully, how carefully we need to look after this ongoing mind of ours. Every thought, every way we use this mind adds or subtracts to a general story. Every loving thought increases the general loving nature of our mind. Every angry, resentful thought, the sort of things we'll be start looking at today, makes that mind darker, less comfortable, more capable of leading us into harmful actions to our fellow beings. Caring for this mind of ours is so much what the Bodhisattva teachings show us. Mind is something very precious. This is something we should have understood in the precious human existence. We need to think of it like finding an ancient Botticelli painting, Rembrandt or Gauguin, whichever your famous painter is. But sometimes they find an undiscovered painting, and then they handle it so carefully because it's worth millions and millions. This mind of ours is all we are. It's all we've got. The body, when we're thinking of physical karma, well, it can hurt, it can be killed, but we will get another one. And we've had so many in the past. We've been every possible shape, size, type of sentient being. This life, which is so familiar, which seems like everything, will end, and then we'll have another one. Bodies come and go. We live in the body. That can be very comfortable or very uncomfortable, depending. But this mind which inhabits the body, it says, like a guest in a hotel room, this mind is all we have, all we are. And we need to really look after it. We won't get another one. We can't leave it for 15 minutes and borrow somebody else's mind. We can't hire the come-upper's mind for 15 minutes. That might be fun, but we can't. We are always living in this mind of ours. So we must learn to look after it so beautifully, not to let it hurt itself, to treasure it like such a precious, precious thing, much more than a Gauguin or a Rembrandt painting. Our whole future in this life and many lives depends upon it. But anyway, that's a topic to come back to when we look more at the Bodhisattva teachings, how the mentality, the sattva, the attitude, the courage that will awaken this mind of ours to its potential. But this continuity of the mind is very, very important. So today we're starting to look at the very classical teachings about what damages that continuity and sows difficult seeds for the future, seeds of karma. And the first one of these is called avarice. I suppose we could find other terms, but let's just call it avarice. And this means selfish desire and attachment. And here we come across a problem, because very often the Buddhist texts that our Tibetan teachers use are used to writing things very shortly, assuming that people know the meaning. Very important things, like we talk often of no self in Buddhism, non-ego. And many people think that means nothing at all, nihilism. Completely wrong. We should make it longer. We can't say the Buddha taught there is no self. We should say the Buddha taught there is no lasting, permanent, changeless self. Because there were other philosophers at the time that taught those things, like a Christian soul we have now, or a lasting God. But what the Buddha did teach at length, the majority of his teachings, is of course that we have a changing, impermanent, and dependent, interdependent self. And the teachings on karma that we're studying now are the nuts and bolts of how that works, how I'm me, you're you. And everyone is who they are through the way they have worked with this interdependent, impermanent stream of consciousness that will go on and on and on, different from other streams of consciousness, until liberation, until we are enlightened. So it's this continuum of consciousness that we're looking at in the teachings on the karma of mind. So in there, the first poison is avarice. Sometimes this is just called desire and attachment, and that's sometimes not helpful. We should say self-centered or deluded desire and attachment, because there are good desires. There are positive karmas, virtuous karmas, based in a desire to help each other, to care for each other, a desire for enlightenment. And we can, attach doesn't sound like the right word, but we can hold on strongly to some things, to our refuge, to our vows, to our bodhisattva commitment. So this thing of clinging or longing in itself is an energy that can be used for the good or for the bad, for the better, for the worse. And when we talk about avarice, we're talking about this ability of our mind to long for something, to really want, or to cling and hold on to something in a way which is based in ignorance, in a deluded projection of self that's not doing us any good. Excuse me, that's not doing us any good and not doing others any good. And then based on this avarice, of course that's why we might steal, cheat others, do physical karmas, we might have sexual misconduct, we might do all sorts of things through it. So it is the root. It says mind is the master, body and speech are the servants. This is the master that leads to physical or verbal harmful actions. Now, there's a point here. These days, it's much talked about. Many of my friends who are involved in therapy or who are involved in secular mindfulness tell me again and again how so many people are not friends with themselves, and how first and foremost what many people need to learn is how simply to love themselves, because they don't like themselves or they hate themselves and so on. And quite right, it's how it is. It leads to some interesting reflection for us about how, as Buddhists, do we love ourselves, given whatever we know about how self-projections are a delusion, an illusion, and so on. So of course we need to learn to love ourselves, to cherish and care for ourselves, but we cherish and care for the good parts of ourselves. This thing of parts and not one fixed whole, one fixed self, is really where the answer lies. We become aware of this stream of consciousness, and we care and nurture for the good things which will help us and everybody, and gradually we get rid of the harmful things. So loving oneself is a long-term love. Let's take a simple example. I hope it's not offensive, but if someone, for instance, is on a diet, then although giving way to temptation, to something very, very tasty and attractive, might look like loving yourself, caring for yourself, because you're giving yourself a treat. In fact, if one resists and sticks to the diet, then one has a much deeper and longer term satisfaction, because as you get fitter and healthier, you really appreciate those short-term efforts at discipline or whatever it is. So our Buddhist way of loving ourselves, in general, in the longer term, is to know we are on this path to freedom. Freedom from karma, freedom of our minds. And the things we do short-term, which might involve not doing the obviously immediate pleasant thing for ourselves, are in fact doing us the biggest favour. And that feeling of I'm doing myself a favour by this is very, very helpful. So loving oneself, caring for oneself, means not necessarily, oh, let's have a little bit more samsara, that way I'm loving myself. But in a longer term, learning to be someone one can be happier and happier about being. You're on the right path. Of course, each person is different. Each person has their history, their childhood, and so on. So how in practice we do that needs to be managed very intelligently, very wisely, very compassionately. But anyway, here we are looking at avarice, self-centered desire and attachment. Self-centered. Self-centered means that rather than feeling a part of everybody, feeling connected with everybody, part of the family of beings, we separate ourselves out and basically we want to use others to benefit this one, rather than our joy coming from loving and caring and being part of a community, a network that functions healthily. A lot to think about there. So anyway, the avarice is self-centered. And in the text, it tells us there are 3 areas. The first one concerns our own stuff. Now, this could be actual stuff, property and possessions that we cling to, that we're proud of, can't let go of. It could also be our reputation. It could be our skills. Maybe you're a good musician, maybe you're a brilliant intellectual or athlete or whatever it is. And it is this self-cherishing. It's summed up, maybe it's a bit exaggerated, but by the thought, there's really nobody better than me. It's a form of pride. It means we have gifts. We have the gifts from our past karma, some skills, and we cling to those gifts rather than thinking compassionately how to share those gifts, how to offer them to everybody else, and also how to be free of them, so that if our skill is damaged, imagine you're an athlete and then we see tennis players, football players, they get injuries, then their whole life is changed. So whatever gifts we have, whatever wealth we have, possessions we have, skills we have, reputation we have, we, by not clinging, become free from it. When it changes, if it goes, it's no big deal. We can let go. Here we're looking at the mind, which clings, because that is going to lead on to all sorts of dubious activity to keep what we've got and fight off others and so on. So the first area of avarice is about our stuff. The second area, not to mention, not just what we have, but maybe wanting even more, an even better reputation, and so on and so on. The second area is about other people's stuff, where we want what they have. Of course, part of this is jealousy. Rather than rejoicing in what they have, we want it for ourselves. It might be somebody else's partner, husband, wife, companion, somebody else's friend, they're more friendly, or their possessions, or their job, or their reputation, their closeness with a teacher, the fact that they seem closer to a lama than we are, whatever it is. What they have, we want. The third area, it says, concerns the things that don't particularly belong to anybody, not to us yet, not specifically to somebody else. So classically it's like all of the gold that's still in the ground, or the platinum, or the oil, or whatever it is, thinking, if only I could have that then. And lots of people imagine, if only I won the lottery, or suddenly some large amount of money, or what would I do with it? So it is this fantasizing of having stuff in general. Now these three things are called mind poisons. We need to think about the idea of poison. Usually it means it doesn't take much poison to spoil the whole. With food, just a few drops of poison or one ingredient that's gone rotten will spoil the whole dish. So this mind of ours, and we see this all the time. There's maybe lots of good or neutral stuff going on in our mind, but once desire gets a grip on you, self-centered desire, or you really want what somebody else has gotten, and you can't let go of those thoughts, we see how it poisons the mind, can lead to all sorts of actions in the long term, states of being, because if we don't get what we want, then we can be so depressed. We can sometimes a person's whole life can be dominated by what didn't happen before. The boyfriend, the girlfriend they never had, they couldn't get, broke their heart. The rest of their life they live in sadness. So we can see the power, the poisonous power. So with the karma of mind, we have those three areas, and of course with the three types of result. So if there is a lot of this, and it's very powerful and very poisonous, then the worst possible result, the accumulation of all of those thoughts and feelings and the way your mind has been day after day, year after year, can be rebirth as a preta, a deprived spirit. Some people call them hungry ghosts. In the teachings on suffering, we'll look more at how that happens after death, how the consciousness programmed by so much poisonous being eaten up with desire and attachment can produce these worlds, these hallucinations of being so desperately lonely and lacking anything, desperate for even a drop of water, a bit of food, something. That will be the worst possible outcome. Then the second type of outcome usually starts. But even if you're reborn, human, then it says this self-centered desire or attachment and clinging will dominate. So we're looking at this continuity of mind where we set patterns in motion, and then thought after thought, fantasy after fantasy, memory after memory, we are reinforcing our self-centered desire, or reinforcing the clinging where it's going to be so difficult to let go of things. So one will be reborn and then grow up with a lot of desire and attachment. The other result is a general result on the environment, and here it says the main thing is to be reborn in a place where the quality of food is poor. We live in a rather complicated world these days. Maybe it was simpler in the past, and life is mainly your home, your shelter, and the food you eat, and the local friends you have. So in the past, where people were born, mainly they spent all their lives. So being born in a place with very poor food resources was a lifetime's destiny, and quite quite a serious thing. These days we're more mobile. The whole way of life is much more complex. But that's the general environmental result. When we come to the positive karmas, we'll see the opposite, is that rather than self-centered longing, then we have altruistic longing. We develop more and more a mind which is longing to find ways to help each other, to help our fellow beings, to serve them. And it's a mind which is no longer longing for things for oneself. So this means that we learn to be happy with whatever we have. It's wonderful. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's ridiculous. If you're happy with what you have, well, you have it. Therefore, you're happy. It's like some mathematical equation. You've already got it. And if you're happy with it, you're happy. A simple thing, a glass of water, a cup of tea, can be such a wonderful pleasure if we learn how to make it a pleasure. Rather than wanting a more beautiful cup, a higher quality tea, and so on. Someone to serve it to us, a butler, or whatever. Just be happy with what we have. And then not clinging. Be able to let go. Even the most wonderful things. Even the things when they hurt, if your reputation is damaged. You lose your job. Never mind. You can let it go. Then your mind is free. It's wonderful. We've taken the poison, the potential poison out. It's like having poison in the kitchen. And if something goes wrong, it can somehow get into the food. We've taken it out. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough for this particular talk. Always a pleasure to be able to share the Dharma with you. Meditate well, think well. Please learn to know this mind of yours better and to care for it so beautifully. Thank you very much. Go well. Speak soon.